Andrew Haug here on Heavy at Home, where we showcase the greatest in Australian heavy music, and this band has just unleashed their long-awaited new record titled Flesh is Air. It's Sydney's the AMENTA. We do have main man Tim Pope on the line to talk to us all about the album and everything else to do with the AMENTA and being a hard-working Australian band and also taking their music across the globe as well. G'day Tim, welcome to AndrewHaug.com.
Hey Andrew, thanks for having me, man.
Good to have you on the air, and again, it's good to actually have some brand new music from the AMENTA finally. And on initial listen, it's definitely not as, how would I put it, cold and sort of digitized as some of the previous sort of material, or even at least sort of industrialized. It's very organic in a lot of sense. It's very direct. Would you sort of feel you took the same sort of approach with what I just assumed?
Yeah, I definitely think so. It was kind of, all of our albums are kind of reactions to each other. And our last album, Non, was a really digital and really cold, clinical album, sort of on purpose. That was a reaction to what we did with our first album. So this album, when we started to write, any ideas that had that kind of sound, because we don't really like repeating ourselves.
Yep.
So when we started creating this album, the ideas that really got us excited were things that were different to what we've done before, which turned out to be a sort of a more organic sound. The other side of it was we spent all our albums, obviously, as you're well aware, it takes us years and years to actually release anything. And we don't muck around in that time. We're working really hard and polishing and fine-tuning things. But in order to keep us sort of excited, we needed something that was a bit quicker and a bit easier to sort of work with. So this, I think, is a lot more spontaneous as well as a bit more organic. There's a lot more, I guess, rough edges and a lot more warmth just because there's a bit more of a human side to it. So I think it's an excellent thing to add to our discography, I think.
Now, when you mention, of course, you guys do take your time releasing records, which is totally true. Is that just because it's hard to let go of, the finer details?
Well, that's always the plan. I think between all of our albums, it's always been, well, fuck, we've got to be a bit quicker about this. We've got to strike all the iron hot kind of thing. But the reason for the delay is a couple of things. One is that perfectionism that you're talking about, and we do agonise over things and keep reworking them. One of the things with Flesh is Air is it was more about if we captured what we felt was a moment, then we just kind of left it and moved on and just tried to be a bit more quick about it. But the other side of it is that we invest so much time and emotional energy in these albums that after you're finished, the idea of sitting down and starting to write the next one is just heartbreaking. So we usually spend that time trying to play live a bit, getting out and hopefully touring overseas and all that sort of stuff, which obviously unfortunately means that we're not sitting down and writing music as well. So it's kind of that little double-edged sword where we're saving ourselves but also not really able to do anything even if we wanted to. So there's always this kind of delay, but we definitely want to get a lot quicker at it. And for the first time ever, I actually have some ideas for lyrics for the next album before I've actually started writing some stuff down before we even have started writing music, and that's never happened for me before. So hopefully the next one will be a bit quicker.
Good sign. Well, let's talk a bit about the other positives with the band being a group that actually does tour overseas. Now, we know there's stacks and stacks of Australian bands in this country, and sadly many of them don't make it out of Australia. Tell us a bit about how the AMENTA is received overseas, because we'll get onto the Australian side of things. It's a whole different kettle of fish when it comes to reactions in our own backyards. But fill us in on how it sort of works for the AMENTA internationally. Do people sort of raise an eyebrow because you're from Australia? And I mean, do you find that you're certainly making your mark within the international sort of waters?
I think we definitely are. Every trip we've had over there, we've made new fans. We've sort of cemented relationships with others. It's always a positive thing. Obviously, we play a pretty polarizing brand of extreme music, and a lot of areas aren't really into that. So we play Germany, which is a lot more traditional, and you get the few crazy people who absolutely love it, but there's a lot of people wearing their denim jackets out the back, not really giving a shit about an industrial death metal band essentially. So you kind of you take the good with the bad. For every I won't say lackluster, because the shows are excellent and we have a great time, and the people who love it really, really do love it. But for every one of those where there's just sort of, maybe 10 people who are really, really connecting, we play other shows where it'll be hundreds of people who really get it. I remember on our first European tour, we played in Katowice in Poland, and we were the opening band, and normally in Australia, opening bands kind of get ignored. At the end of our set, we had all these Polish people sort of chanting our name, which has never happened
Mm-hmm.
since. And that was really cool. And there was guys with Australian flags and things like that. So I think the Australian thing does give us a little bit of cachet, but it's cool going out there because you go from Australia, where it's to a certain extent we can be big fish in a small pond. You know, we know our crowd. We're playing to a lot of the same people and all that sort of stuff. You go over there and you're playing to people who've never heard you before, and you get that really pure moment where they get really excited about you, that never heard you before. They see you and just go, fuck, what the hell is this? This is awesome. So it's actually really quite rewarding.
Well, let's talk a bit about the Australian scene now. We know at times with many great bands in this country, it can just be hit and miss. The scene just doesn't have the population, as they say, to sort of sustain a healthy scene of larger turnouts. But then again, you get all these international bands touring and bang, everyone comes out the woodwork because such and such is from Sweden or from the UK or whatever. And you often wonder where the hell have all these other people when there's local shows, and especially the amount of great music that is heard constantly, not only on Heavy at Home, the Australian show Monday nights, but also on AndrewHaug.com, where we do highly support Australian heavy music. What do you think, as a long-standing band in the Australian heavy music scene, needs to change in this country in order for the scene to grow and thrive?
I think there needs to be a change in the way we as bands are approaching gigs and promoters are approaching gigs. There seems to be bills have becoming these sort of massive festival things, or there's a lot of bands. This has the effect of, one, driving the price up. So it's unfortunate that people will pay a lot more for an overseas band than they will for an Australian band. That's just sort of, for some reason, Australia has this inbuilt desire to support other countries. But there's that. But I think they need to start making smaller gigs, which are more of an event.
Yep.
So the best gigs I've ever been to are just, they're often not bands that are really thematic or not linked in any sound, but maybe thematically linked. So you put together something that's a bit more of a show. That's me as a music fan. That is what I would like to see. No, that would make me go out to shows. I love thinking of a band from Melbourne who maybe are right on the limit of metal, the band called Airs, who I really, really dig, and I've been listening to a lot lately. I think they'd go down really well with a sort of a more full-on death metal or black metal band, and then you could have an electronic band in there. As long as it's all extreme and dark, I think it would kind of work thematically.
Do you encourage, mixed bills? Because I think that's what I'm starting to see a bit of a slight change in, but it's still very segregated at the same time. You'll get 4 bands all sound the same on the one bill. Okay, it tailors perfectly to that style of crowd, but they're just preaching to the converted. Do you think that would possibly help the scene be a bit more rejuvenated if it creates a better community, that everyone is in it together? It doesn't matter what sort of style you play. Do you think a mixed bill is the way to go?
I really do. Not only as a fan, because that's what I would want to see. I love really extreme black metal. I wouldn't want to see 10 bands in a row. I'd rather break it up with some other stuff because I like a whole bunch of music. But the other side of it is it helps a scene become a bit more interesting in the way they actually write music, because instead of taking influence from people who make similar sort of music, you're taking inspiration from all these different kind of genres.
Yep.
It's like in genetics. If you just make the sweet, sweet love with your family, you end up with all sorts of genetic problems.
Yep.
But if you go outside the family, you start to bring in sort of more interesting things and strengthen the bloodline.
Yep.
That's what musicians need to aim for.
Awesome. Well, let's mention a bit about the brand new record. Of course, it is now available. Flesh is Air, so people should definitely get out and support Australian heavy music and the AMENTA's new record if you're a fan of the Extremities. Now, let's talk a bit about an Australian tour. We're looking at a couple of shows coming up in the future to support this new opus.
Yeah, we've got a few shows now. We've just played on Saturday. We played at the Evelyn Hotel, the Metal Obsession 5th birthday, which was really cool. That was our first show back from. I guess our first show back after this album. Then coming up, we're supporting Cradle of Filth on their East Coast shows.
Yep.
That'll be pretty interesting. Obviously, they're probably a very different crowd, but I guess that's kind of the mixed bill we're talking about. Hopefully, people will see us, not really have heard us before, and kind of hopefully we'll either convert them or piss them off. Either way, it's a win-win. It's pretty funny.
Yep.
And then after that, we're playing a couple of sort of disparate shows, playing one over in Perth as we head over to Indonesia to play the Hamasonic Festival, which
lots of Australian bands on that bill. It's great. It's a big takeover.
Yeah, it's great. So it'll be great. We know a lot of people going over, so it should be a lot of fun. And then when we come back, we're hoping to do a bit more of a headlining thing. So hopefully in about June, we might get together a couple of our bands we like and try and make a sort of a really interesting package, and hopefully have the kind of gig that I was talking about before, something that's a bit more exciting and interesting for people.
Awesome. Well, all the best with it. And again, keep us posted here on andrewhaug.com for all things the AMENTA. We can get you to choose your favourite track from the latest record. I know you're a perfectionist, so this might be a little bit difficult, but we'll see if you can pick one.
I guess the one that I think is probably going to resonate with quite a lot of people is probably Obliterate's Prayer, which is kind of the centrepiece of the album, both lyrically and also geographically.
Locked in. Thanks again, Tim.
My pleasure. Thank you very much, Andrew.
Let's check out some of the AMENTA now on andrewhaug.com.